Do you have one of these open recalls on your HD app? Well, this has been bugging me all winter. Unfortunately, we've had winter here in Colorado this year, and I've not been able to take my bike in to get this cleared. But now we're entering spring, and we're having some warm days in between the snowstorms. Over the holidays, I also purchased this thrash and skid plate. I really want to put this on the bike and protect all those wires dangling below the bike, just in case I should run over something. But I didn't want to put this on until I got that recall taken care of. So getting that handled by the dealer, getting it cleared before blocking all that with this cover, because the dealer may need to charge you to remove this and put it back on if you go in with this already in place. So you may have seen my videos on this recall already. The voltage regulator wire is rubbing against the engine case, and then eventually it wears through the wire and shorts. So your bike just goes dead. Now some of you may have experience where your bike goes dead and then it comes back to life, and then you're riding, it goes dead again and comes back to life. Well, it could be a short in this voltage regulator wire that's bouncing around and rubbing as you're riding. So the recall was to reroute this wire and use a zip tie to attach it to an existing wire tie that's already there and prevent it from moving around and rubbing. When I did my first video on this topic, we took a look at my 23.5, which was not in the recall, only the 2024 models. And I noticed that mine appeared to be rubbing. See right there, it appears to be rubbing. So shortly after that video, Harley updated the recall to include the 23.5. So if you have a 23.5 CVO or a 2024 new Touring design, so a Touring model with that new infotainment screen, your bike is included in this recall and your regulator wire may be rubbing. So many of you checked out your bikes. On my bike, I decided to zip tie a little rubber hose to the point where it was rubbing against the frame, and then I left it. But I've never done the recall, and the recall really wants you to move that wire over and use a zip tie to attach it to an existing wire. So I often like to do my own work, and so I thought I would take my own risk here and do the recall, but I am going to take it to the dealer and have it inspected. So they'll verify my work. I'll save them some time, but I thought I'd share it with you. So this is what the recall looks like now. There's been 4 revisions to it. The last revision, they added some additional models, mainly the 23.5 CVOs. So if we go down, they provide some photos, and I showed this in my last 2 videos, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But this is what I was paying attention to. So this is your voltage regulator wire. It's been disconnected from the voltage regulator, and they show where it is generally rubbing on the engine case. And you can see there's a wire over here on the left that is currently affixed to the frame. So there's a little holder there holding it to the frame, and then there's a zip tie running around that wire. So my belief is this voltage regulator wire was meant to be in this zip tie, this cable tie affixed to the frame. And for whatever reason, during the assembly of the bike, they took this other fan wire and attached it, but they didn't attach the voltage regulator wire. So maybe the instructions were wrong on the line as these bikes were assembled, and then they later corrected that. We can get a better look at this if we take a look at the picture in the service manual. In the service manual, they have a much better picture of how this wire is supposed to be routed. So you can see it's coming up in front of this bar that goes across. So this is part of the frame, and this goes across. So it goes in front of that, but then it comes up to the frame and it's cable tied right to the frame. So this clamp is attached to the frame. So I think this is how they intended it to be routed, but it didn't happen that way in the end for some of our bikes. So I wanted to see if I could do this recall myself, do it correctly before I take it into the dealer to have it inspected. Let's take a look at the bike. So the instructions want you to remove your bag, your side cover, and your main fuse. When I remove the main fuse, I turn the ignition on, wait for the security to disarm, pull the fuse, and then remember to turn the ignition back off. They then want you to remove the cowling that goes over the radiator, which I've already done. And then I've also protected my fender with some towels. It's a good idea. They want you to also remove the crash guard. And I really did not want to do that. There's only 3 bolts, but I really didn't want to remove this whole thing. So I started by removing the voltage regulator itself. I would not recommend that. These bolts are in there with a lot of Loctite, and it's very easy to strip. And here's what happened to me. So use a torch and heat those bolts up. Everything in the front here has blue Loctite on it, and a little bit of heat will soften up that Loctite and make them easier to come off. This torch is something I got off of Amazon. I really like it. I use it for smoking whiskey drinks. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check it out. They want you to remove the radiator cradle screws. So I pulled this one off and the one on the other side. That allows you to pull this away from the bike. But they want you to remove the crash guard so that you can remove the top 2 bolts of the crash guard, which allows this caddy to lower, and then you can lean this whole thing forward. So you can lean the radiator and everything forward so you can see that zip tie that's behind here. And that's why they need you to pull this off. With just the bottom, I am able to pull it out enough to get to that zip tie, so I think I can affix my zip tie without having to remove the crash guard, but we'll see. I did pull all the wires out. So I disconnected all these wires underneath, and I was looking at the voltage regulator wire. You can see there's no damage to it. This was my temporary fix that I put on a little piece of hose to prevent it rubbing, and I was just looking on the wire where it appeared to be rubbing. So I attached this with a zip tie, and that's how I've been running thus far. What I'm going to do now is set it correctly to the recall before I take it in and have it inspected. One thing I was considering is, would it be a better way to route this, right? The challenge is this radiator caddy, right? It's got sharp edges, and if it's rubbing anywhere against this caddy, we're going to have issues. But it looks like you could run it underneath the frame cover here and keep it up against the engine case, and that would give it a direct run up to the top. The problem is that the voltage regulator connector is too big, and it just won't fit up under here. You can get it about halfway and then you just get stuck. But to me, it'd be nice to run it behind the carrier here. So this is the crossbar that goes across the frame. It'd be nice to run it up under here and directly into the voltage regulator. And then you could zip tie it in that same spot where that cable tie is, and it would hold it to the side. It also would allow you to shorten the length of this. You could pull off probably 2 inches of this cable, and then you wouldn't have so much of it dangling below the bike. But since this doesn't fit, you'd have to cut this. So you'd cut this, remove some length of wire, and then resolder it back on. The bigger challenge is you'd have to do that while it's on the bike at a pretty tough angle. So it'd be pretty hard to solder this while it was all connected up under the frame here, because you'd cut this off, run it down through the top underneath this frame rail, but then you're trying to solder it under the bike, so it'd be pretty tricky. The other thought I had is, purchasing a new connector here. So you could cut this off and then just put a new connector on and then plug it into the voltage regulator. I think that would work, but I could not locate this on the internet. I could not find this exact connector. It's a Delphi connector. I couldn't find it, but it does look like you could buy it from Harley. Harley does list this connector in their parts, so you could buy the different parts. There's 3 of them, and then I think you could cut this off and then rebuild that connector after you've fed the wire up through here. And then, of course, you could cut some of this length of this wire off to make it a lot neater connection. But considering this bike is under warranty still, and we have a recall that just, affixes this cable to the frame, I'm just going to follow that path for now. But I think that's a future design that Harley could do, is run it up under there. It'd be a lot more secure, and it would get rid of all this extra bulk hanging out underneath the bike. All right, so to give myself some more room, I opted to remove the 2 3/16 Allens that were securing the crash bar to the frame and the carrier. And when I did that, the whole crash bar moves forward with ease. So I just pulled this forward And now I have plenty of room to work with. So you don't need to remove the crash bar completely, so you don't have to pull those bolts off. The whole thing just leaned forward once I loosened those off. Now we have a lot more room to get to this cable clamp that we're going to run a cable tie around our voltage regulator wire to hold it in place. So this is the path for the voltage regulator wire to go. You're going to go in front of the cooling system carrier. So you'll go in front of this. So this is the front of the bike is this way. And you're going to go through this opening here. And you're going to keep it along the left side and then attach to the cable clamp up above. Now, to me, it would make more sense if it ran behind here. So this is welded to the frame. This carrier here, this whole assembly is welded. And it's very smooth. This is really nice smooth edge on it, so it wouldn't do any damage. So you would run your voltage regulator wire behind this and straight up to the voltage regulator, still attaching it to a cable clamp on the left-hand side just to hold it. But unfortunately, it just won't fit through here. So we're going to route it through that hole. I'm going to pull this out to give myself a little room. And we're just going to push it up in there. With our cable tie wrapped around the voltage regulator wire, and I believe this is the fan wire, which is attached to the frame right here through this cable tie. When I pull this cable tie tight, it'll bring that voltage regulator wire over and snug it up against that cable tie connection. And that'll prevent it from moving around as you're riding around on your bike. With everything reassembled, so we have our two 3/16 Allens back in place, the crash bar is secure once again, voltage regulator is back in place, missing one screw that was stripped. This is all ready to go. If we take a look underneath, you can see I have all the wires back in place. So everything is remounted as it was. I re-added this cable tie loose. So you allow some room for this to move around. So you don't pull this one tight. The voltage regulator then runs up where we have our new cable tie holding it in place. So everything is back to the way it should be and matches the picture in the recall. So just to review all the connections underneath here. First of all, we have the water pump wire. So this connects to your water pump right here. And then this is your Jiffy stand sensor. So a lot of people are disabling this so that the bike thinks the Jiffy stand is always up. But this is what senses whether your Jiffy stand is up or down. And then we have our cooling fan wire is right here. And then over here is actually your fog lamp. So this is a block off plate. So you would remove that. And then this wire goes up to your fog lamps and is controlled by the menu on the infotainment system. Underneath here is the crank position sensor. So that plugs in right here. This is its little wire tie Christmas tree holder. So it's right here. So that is your crank position sensor, which plugs in under the bike here. And then this big guy is your voltage regulator wire, the one that we've been dealing with. So at this point, we're ready to take the bike to the dealer and have them inspect my work. Hopefully they won't have to change anything and it'll pass the recall. And then I can finally get rid of that red triangle of a recall for my bike and the Harley-Davidson app. Well, it's the next day and the triangle is gone from my Harley-Davidson app. I no longer have an open recall. I will say when I got home, the triangle was still there. It had not cleared. The other thing to note is your bike doesn't have to update the app. Your app just needs to connect to Harley's database, which then shows the dealer cleared the recall. So you don't have to worry about updating this with connecting it to your bike. So now I have no open recalls. Finally, I'm all green. One tip if you're using one of these butane torches, I think they work really well for heating up bolts that have Loctite around them. I always put the flame directly in the center of the bolt, but you need to be careful of what's surrounding the bolt. If there's any plastic, rubber, or anything sensitive to heat, it may melt it. So be very careful when applying heat to a bolt to get it off. I really do like these food torches. The flame is very short and very precise, so you can get it right in the center of that bolt. So now I can freely install my thrash and skid plate without having to worry about the recall and being charged for removing and reinstalling this. On my next video, I want to show you how to get the correct torque values to install this part. There are a lot of videos on how to install this, but most of them have the torque values incorrect. So I'm going to show you how to get that accurate, but I'll do that on my next video. So I sure hope you found this information useful, and if you did, you'll go share it with someone else. But until next time, in the friction zone.